All right, we'll end with some engagement best practices. And when I talk about engagement, I'm thinking of your presence and interaction inside of weekly or biweekly learning activities. Usually these can be asynchronous discussions of some sort or some other type of discourse within your class. So 7 tips here. Number 1 is defining the learning goal. So being really clear about how does this activity support learning. And this helps me to focus my interaction. So like I do with formative feedback and assignments, I'll do the same thing in my engagements in the course, my interaction. I will write out, this is my purpose or my goal. And you can even put that in your LMS and kind of make it invisible to your students. And that way, the next time you teach, you can pull that up or you can refine it. So number 2 is make inquiry your go-to engagement strategy. So for most of us, input is our go-to engagement strategy. In fact, on the Strengths Finder, like my number 2 is input. So I have to really remind myself of the inquiry. What's my inquiry to content ratio? And I want my inquiry to be higher. So questions. My sentence is ending in a question mark. And most of these can be really succinct. So number 3, be succinct to make engagement sustainable. So let me give you some examples. One is simple, like, tell me more about this. Like, you said this, and I like to quote my students, and then to say, explain like your rationale, or tell me more, like I said, or I'm curious about. That's a great stem. I'm curious about this. Why? Where did you find that kind of thing? So be really succinct. You can reply very quickly to all your students, to everyone really, when you're using that approach. Number 4, know when your pastoral and coaching voice is needed. When is your student struggling, or when perhaps is the post that they're putting in intersecting with their lives on a real heart level? Or maybe when do you need to move it or press it into a heart level? Maybe they're stuck in their head and they need you to help them descend into their heart. And so just really being able to, I think of it as almost making an affective scan of a student's contribution to see what's going on there and what do they need. Timing is essential. I think of this as striking when the iron is hot. So if you're a blacksmith and you've got the iron in the forge, you pull it out, you hit it. When it is red, it's malleable. When it's cooled, your hammer's bouncing off of it. So if you're replying to your students, let's say that their discussion prompt is their first post or something's due on a Thursday, and you're replying to them the next Monday, that iron is no longer hot and shapeable. They may not be going back to even look at that discussion. They might be moved on to the next week. So you want to know those windows where your input during the week is going to have the most effect, influence them the most. So timing is essential. Quote students and ask for more. So that's what I talked about a little bit earlier. I love to highlight, copy and paste. You said this. I'd like you to consider what you said in light of this. I'd like you to go deeper by saying, how does this apply in this situation? I'd like to challenge this. I'd like to play devil's advocate on what you said here. So quoting the students does a few things. One is it shows that you're paying attention. And 2, it really shows that you care about their words. For them, that also means that they're accountable to their words and that their words have weight. So I really like that practice as a go-to. I think it honors the student as the locus of learning, where the learning is taking place. And it meets them, it's a great adult learning principle, meets them where they are, what's top of mind for them. And then direct the flow of interaction. So I think yourself as a traffic cop, telling people when to stop and to go, and kind of pointing to where they need to drive. So let's say that Adam has a post and it relates or contradicts Janine's. So talk with them and say, hey, Janine, Adam wrote something that's talking about and I'd like you to reply to him. So you're actually telling students how to reply, and you're helping them think kind of like that Venn diagram. Their conversations are not just staying between you and them, but you're showing them how to interrelate with each other. I find that very few instructors do this, and that's something that can really add a dynamic and a lot of back and forth to online conversations, which can tend to be just kind of like post and leave. So direct that flow of interaction. And then kind of more just to end here with how do I go about grading, and when do I do it? I always, like I said before, want to put it as in second place to the interaction. So I don't start with grading. That would probably be my biggest principle on things like threaded discussions. I don't want to come into them with a grading mindset, because I put my assessor hat on, and in an assessor place, it really stifles the discourse, because I'm not seeing my students as students. I'm not seeing the conversation as a conversation. I'm looking at it as like maybe an essay that I want to grade. And it's just not helpful to me and not helpful to them. So I think that's probably the first principle, is I don't do it right away. I do it after I've worked through everything. With something like threaded discussions, I keep it as simple as possible. If you're using a 100-point system, it makes it really hard, because that has too much nuance in it. I'm actually not a big fan of grading individual threaded discussions, because mainly because I wouldn't do it in the classroom. If I got a group speaking to one another and having a conversation, I wouldn't stand behind them with a clipboard, observing the conversation and giving them a grade. That would stifle, again, the conversation. So I like to do kind of like a grade something that is somehow related to but separate. So here's an idea. Like I might have them, after a set of discussions, create a reflection upon their discussions, and then I'm putting a grade on that. I may have them even self-assess their participation. Let's say they participated in 1 out of the 2 discussions, and they write up a reflection on the one they did participate in, but not the other. Then they're also going to say in there, yeah, and I had a busy week and I didn't participate in the one. So they're also reflecting on probably the grade they should be given. So I try to detach that a little bit from the actual conversation itself. So grading a reflection, and I want to get those back to students probably before the next interaction happens. So a lot of times I'll package these, and instead of grading every discussion, I'm grading groups. And then another tack, if you're designing things, is to grade a deliverable. So let's say all these 3 or 4 discussions, they support a larger kind of group assignment or reflective assignment that the student's submitting. And so I'm just grading that one thing instead of grading 3 or 4 or 5 things. So just in sum, the number one thing I think with successful online instructors is they think about their time and they use it judiciously. They really plan out how many hours they're going to invest a week. And when they do that, they put it in the right places. Number 2, one of those right places is investing in formative feedback for their students. And they have workflows and plans for making that formative feedback happen. And then they're all about engagement. And they've created workflows and simple approaches to engaging with their students promptly, so that their students are benefiting from the teacher, the expert voice in the classroom.
Okay, Aaron, since this is the last segment, I just wanted to do a couple follow-up questions.
Yeah.
So one is, one of the things I've seen is that the biggest impact that a lot of faculty have had with students is whenever they go off script. There's a student that has a particular need, and they set up a phone call or a Zoom meeting.
Yes.
And this, we hear the comments from students, and they're like, wow, this faculty member was willing to go above and beyond. Now, you can't always do that because you have the rest of your life to live, right? But when would you recommend that faculty do that? And, how do they kind of initiate those type of things? And how have you done that?
Yeah, it makes me think of something that we've done in the past, which is a week 2 check-in. So it's not with everyone, but what I'll do is I'll go into the LMS and I'll sort my students. I can sort by kind of their last participation date. And I can find a lot of times, at the bottom there, I'll find someone who's not been in for, I can find the outliers very quickly. And then I'll go in and maybe just do a check on who's turned in assignments and find outliers there. And I might find, let's say in a class of 25, I might find 2 or 3 who have have disappeared. And I will reach out to them and I'll say, hey, just want to check in. I noticed, and I was like, you haven't been in. I was looking at the logs and you haven't been in 7 days, and just wanted to see if anything, was going on, if you were okay. And if there's any way I can support you. So I'm assuming in my language that, life got in the way. And, a lot of times what will happen with students, if they get into a course and they start feeling like they're in over their head, they get into that, not flight, fight, not, they freeze. That's what happens. They totally will lock up and they will start becoming avoidant, and they need a voice. They almost need you to help crowbar them out of that. That's a good time to check in with students, and also a good time to reach out with that kind of email. I think too, you can use the same tools to see patterns of disengagement and reach out to students. I think the other thing is, if you're really attentive, if you're doing these engagement best practices inside of things like threaded discussions, to really trust your gut, your discernment. Like, you'll know if someone's having a really difficult time. When I taught high school online courses, I found that that the introverts had more space with their thoughts. And so people would share more and actually become much more vulnerable in an online course because of that margin and the safety that I would try to build in the classroom culture. But that resulted in students also sharing things that were really difficult and where we would need to get them, resources. So working with our principal at the time to help students who were, even like contemplating suicide or having really tough stuff going on at home. And I had a one-to-one comparison. I used to teach at the same school, brick and mortar, and I probably had 3 or 4 times as much of those types of situations when I was teaching online than I did in person. So you can see a lot, you can observe a lot in those discussion posts.
Yeah, often I think online makes it easy to do the initial disclosure, and then you can go deeper through Zoom or a phone call. Part of what I was thinking is, you're sharing, you kind of have the bell curve, and often courses are designed to hit the kind of 60% in the middle of the bell curve.
Yep.
You have people at one end that are struggling, and you kind of covered those. The other end that I see that our students really like to engage one-to-one with faculty are the people who are at the other end, who are excelling.
Yes.
And they want to engage with the faculty almost as if they're kind of a free consultant. So they're like, hey, you're having me do a strategic plan for my organization.
Yeah.
I'm really doing this for my organization, and I want you to give me more feedback, because we're going to implement this thing, or a grant or a fundraising plan, so, and they've really enjoyed that a lot. So
that's a great model, like thinking of the outliers, because we tend, as teachers, we have to, right? We kind of teach, we have to teach the middle.
Right.
But then it's like saying, okay, how can I support and help others who are on those two ends? That's a great way to think about it. And a great way to think about where I'm investing my time, because I can't probably sustain that for everyone, right? Or for most people. Yeah.
Yeah. So now with yourself, how often do you usually go in and do grading and feedback? How often are you going in the LMS and taking a big chunk of time?
Just going to LMS itself. Looking at a pattern, probably like every other day.
Every other day.
My pattern of presence. Yeah. And when I think of that, like I think of it like another educator had said, am I leaving footprints when I'm doing that? Like I had one instructor who was going in often, spending lots and lots of time. But when I looked at his logs and what he was doing, he's reading and viewing, but never really participating. He wasn't leaving a footprint in the course. So to the students, he had never been there, even though he was very active.
Yeah, they call that lurkers, people who just sit in the background, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So for us, I think, Monday and Friday are the most critical days, because students post discussions on Thursday, and then they post everything else on Sunday.
That's a good rhythm.
But, and that's where I encourage our faculty to do deep dives, but then they might do, like you said, something lighter, if they have other time. So, okay. Well, Aaron, thank you. This has been extremely helpful. I found your book, Excellent Online Teaching, very helpful, and we have our faculty going through it. So we want to continue to learn from you, and thank you for being willing to do this. So,
yeah, it's great being with you. Thanks.